Clearly, Sunday's election in Sweden was a disaster for nationalism from any perspective. After having done everything it could to present itself as the moderate nationalist party, and despite the migrant crisis, the Stockholm attack, the sexual and violent crime, and the astronomical cost of these third world migrants, the Sweden Democrats managed to only raise their share of the vote by 5%, going from 13% in 2014 to 18% this time. Well short of what they needed to make themselves a key player, with the Social Democrats way out in front as the largest party. I was genuinely shocked. From the evidence available, 30% was clearly unattainable, but 25% seemed absolutely realistic. 20% would have been a disappointing night, but 18% is a catastrophe. And the thought the Sweden Democrats would still be the third party after all that has happened in the last 4 years was simply unthinkable. And yet, it happened. This is the result that democracy delivered for the Swedish people in the midst of their multicultural nightmare. The Swedes' nationalist outrage is now manifest as a largely irrelevant grouping in parliament who all the other groups have already promised to ignore. And Alternative for Sweden got nowhere near the 4% mark they needed for their first parliamentary seats, hovering around the 1% mark. A truly baffling set of results that left only two possible scenarios in my mind. Either the vast majority of the Swedish people have reconciled themselves to the death of their nation, or there must have been some impropriety with the electoral process, and I haven't been alone in these suspicions. Can I prove that there was any foul play against nationalists in the election? Well, yes I can. Firstly, I can show you how YouTube shut down the AFS channel during the election campaign, putting all their videos into limited state, which meant they didn't appear in the suggestions and could not be commented on or easily shared. This censorship has now been reversed. And I can show you a voting system that's only semi-anonymous, where you pick up the ballot papers for your party of choice in full public view. Sweden's pretty big on shame traditionally, and there's still no bigger shame in Sweden than loving your nation and wanting to protect it. I can tell you that the website of the Swedish Election Authority unaccountably went down during the counting process on Sunday evening. Here we see panellists debating the question on Swedish TV, presenting the graphic that is doing the rounds, which alleges that before the site went down, SD were on 27%, and when it came back up they were on 17%. The details of this are still unclear, so I'm not reading too much into this yet, though it certainly smells. One thing I am reading a lot into, and which I think shows us the depths to which the Swedish establishment has sunk, is the public disavowal of the Sweden Democrats by Sweden's state TV broadcaster SVT, just because its leader had dared to suggest that third world migrants find it harder to get jobs in Sweden because they aren't Swedish. Well, there's a hanging offence for you. How many Swedish voters do you think this disavowal scared? How many people do you think trust SVT just like they still trust the BBC in Britain? Particularly in a country like Sweden, where trust in state institutions is still very high, this really matters. And it has erased any pretense of SVT's political impartiality or journalistic integrity. It is easy to forget how hateful our enemies are towards us, and what they are capable of doing to destroy us. Have a look at this recent incident that took place against AFS's Jeff Ahl during the campaign. And the police didn't even arrest this woman, despite her being pointed out. Do I think there are people like her, who are this vicious and driven, working in the electoral system? Yes, I do. And ask yourself whether, in this febrile political climate, you trust the vote count in any election in the West anymore. Our enemies have sworn to defeat us by any means necessary. And what remains of democracy is the thinnest of veneers on a civilizational conflict that is bubbling out of control. Whether or not there was any significant fraud in the electoral process, nationalists have essentially become prisoners in their own lands to the globalist elites.